Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and it is the 18th of August and the last day that I'm going to be doing this live stream for a while, maybe until next year even, at 6:30 in the morning. Tomorrow I'm moving the live stream to 7 a.m. I did post something about that on IG, so you can hopefully be able to see that. I've decided to move to 7 a.m. because, as you can see, I have my overhead lights, which were put in my room before I even moved in here. Like the previous owners had installed them, I think. And it's track lighting, and I'm not crazy about it. I don't know. I mean, it's light enough that you can see me, which is good, but I just have a thing. Today it's a gray morning, so it kind of doesn't matter to me, but I mean, I wouldn't, when it gets dark in the mornings, it's kind of like, okay, I actually, when I was setting this up, it was really, really dark. I was like back here, so, yeah, so we'll see who comes on this morning, being it is Sunday morning. Yesterday we did do the Chiron class, and the Chiron class was awesome. It was great fun. Everybody on there was just really awesome, like a really good group of people. I had 6 people for a Chiron, and we were all able to look at each other's Chiron stuff and talk about the wounds and talk about strategies and things. That may be a class that I offer again. I know that in Milford, Corinna would like me to offer it in person. I'm also going to be offering a general astrology course for people who want to understand the basics in Milford, PA. So, yeah, so it's going to be, so we'll see what happens with all of that. We're trying to put things together. I know she's trying to get a lot of different activities in at the store, and and I want to be helpful to her in that, certainly. Although I know I'm trying to balance it with the school that I'm opening. I'm trying to balance it with going back to teaching at university, although I'm teaching remotely, so it's not that I have to drive up to the campus or anything like that. That saves me a lot of time and a lot of petrol or gasoline money. So today I'm just, this is my last day doing it at this hour of the morning. And I don't know if it's going to be like yesterday where a lot of people don't join me, but yeah. But I had a pretty big crowd yesterday, and everybody, the chemistry of it was very, very good. Everybody, we talked about everybody's stuff, and everybody was really good in the class. So yeah, so I enjoyed doing that. I am starting an intuitive development course starting next Sunday, so a week from today. It's $25 a session, or if people pay for all 10, because it's going to be 10 weeks, they can just pay $200 and save $50 off the whole thing. But of course, if you're going to pay for the 10 weeks, you want to make sure that you can do that. I know for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I don't know if I can come every Sunday. So people might pay on a, as I can make it basis. Because each class, I mean, my first lecture on that one is going to, it's going to be, I'm going to talk about some of the basics of, clairvoyance, clairaudience, things like that, and the usual stuff that you would start an intuitive development class with. But then we're going to actually get into, we're going to start, as we talk about the different aspects of intuitive knowing, we're going to do practice sessions, practice with making that work. So, so I'm going to be doing all of that kind of stuff, starting next Sunday between 4 and 6 p.m. Eastern. I know that people in the UK, that's a bit late, but the problem is that Sundays are the one day that when we do anything in family, that Sunday always is the day. And because, actually, when I think about it, nobody actually works on a schedule that like doing it on Monday should be an issue, but it's just been a thing. And sometimes the holidays do legitimately fall on those days. So I try to keep the window from till 3 o'clock open, because a lot of times if I'm going to my sister's house, I'm usually back home by 3, so then I have an hour to prepare, and then I have class at 4. So that's why I'm doing it that way. So anyone who wants to join me for that is actually going to be on, next Sunday. I'll be starting that. Anybody local who is taking Reiki 1 and wants to take Reiki 2, typically speaking, when you take Reiki 2, you take it with the same person. So I did have a class of 3. One of them has enrolled in Reiki 2. The other 2 might not be ready yet, or, maybe they just, don't have the money this month. They spent the last month on Reiki 1, so they may wait on doing Reiki 2. Good morning, Joanne. I'm glad you could join me this morning. I was just kind of giving a rundown of classes and stuff that I'm doing. Yesterday's Chiron class went really, really well. And yes, and then I also did, so yes. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. Right now, you and me. I don't know if some people, because I know I'm starting it at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will be switching to 7 a.m. I don't know if some people thought that today was 7, or, like I said, it could be a lot of reasons. It's Sunday. So cheers to you for being up at this hour. And I was mentioning the intuitive development course, which starts next week. So yeah, as you know, like I said, people can do the whole 10 weeks, or they can just say, I'll pay for the ones that I can attend. So on a weekly basis. So I'm happy and sad about that. And it's raining. Yeah, it is. It is kind of a glum day today. You notice I have the lights on because it is. It's not really that hot out. I had to go out this morning early to fix something outside, and I was like, it's not too bad. With the window open, there's a nice breeze, so at least there's that. It's not like that still hot, humid, and gray that just like completely destroys my soul every summer. But yeah, the good news is I think after Monday, like Monday, Tuesday, it's going to get back to that beautiful autumn-like weather. So we don't have that much longer to wait. So I know, I'm sorry that you couldn't make it, but I may do the Chiron again. So if we decide to do it again, then hopefully maybe you can join in on that one. I don't know. I have to figure out my schedule going forward. And also the school's going to be opening up soon, which might potentially be of interest to you. It's going to be upper 60s, low 70s. I know. You're up farther north. That I wouldn't complain about that. That's really no. That's my favorite temperature. Although, yeah, I would prefer it with, sunny skies and like a breeze, and preferably some autumn, some leaves falling and stuff. But we'll get there. Okay, so what I was going to talk about today. Interesting day. I had. Okay, there's another live stream that I watch Tuesday and Saturday evenings, and it's somebody who I'm not gonna. I don't think it. I can't call this person a friend because I've not met them in person, okay? But I've kind of been talking to them like for the last year over Patreon and stuff. So sometimes you feel like you know somebody, but there's not been any actual. I haven't actually met them. Of course, they are in the UK. So it's so basically I'm not quite sure advisedly how to say that, but this person will do their live stream, and a lot of times I will. Me too. Yes, it's a favorite thing. I usually after the live stream, I will usually gets this email from me, and I try not to make them really long because I know that he gets like so much email and has a hard time getting through it. But I felt like I wrote him a dissertation last night, and really what he was talking about. Okay, the reason I'm talking about what I mentioned to him yesterday is because I had a dream last night, a really intense dream. And I wanted to talk about that today, and what I mentioned to him last night kind of dovetails with the dream content. So that's why I'm putting these two together. So okay, so what was he talking about? He was actually talking about things that people buy or spend money on, and he was talking about virtual things. So he said it's like if you're playing he's talking about virtual reality games, or games where you're in these virtual spaces and you have characters. And when you have these characters in virtual spaces, it's like, you'll spend money to like buy them a coat or buy them this or buy them that, like, buy stuff. And he was just like, you're spending money on something that doesn't exist. Like, that's the way he looks at it. I think he actually does like gaming to some degree, but he's like, you're spending money on something that doesn't exist. Like, he thinks that's just odd. And of course I realized, I said, okay, he's a musician, so he sells downloads of his music. I'm an author, and I will sell ebooks of my, people might buy things in virtual form. So, the idea of buying something digital, but I think I understand his point of it's like, okay, but it's not something you can use. Like, you think it's odd. Yeah, it is. The whole virtual space thing, see, that's what kind of, I remember when this became a thing, I want to say it was in the 2000s sometime. I still feel like I was working for the county then. And the first time people, of course, that's, you had your World of Warcraft people and stuff, the gamers, like, who now have this kind of online space, like, with those kinds of role-playing games. And I was some guys in my office who were, like, doing that. That was the whole Leroy Jenkins thing and everything. I remember they were, sharing some of that around the office. But that was a long time ago. But I remember when they started talking about this idea of, like, buying virtual real estate or living in these virtual spaces. And then it becomes like, why are people doing that? Like, why do you want to invest in something? Because it almost is like, going back to Alan Watts again, he always gets a cameo in my live streams. Talking about, that'd be like saying, okay, I've purchased a menu with, like if you have those diner menus that will also sometimes have pictures of the food on it. It's like, okay, you have a picture of it, but you can't eat it. Like, it doesn't provide any sustenance. But we have a whole system that's based on that. I mean, the money that we have, even if I was able to have physical money, most of the money, and that was kind of the other thing he was bringing up. It's like, well, what is money these days? Because it's actually like it's like, you log in or you open the app for your bank account and there's a dollar figure there of some kind, which is supposedly the money that you have. But it's generally not money that you ever hold in your hand. I mean, you could go to an ATM and you could, or a cash point, and you could actually take out physical money. But that physical money is still not something like, okay, if the whole world economy collapsed and you were starving, you still could not eat that money. You know what I mean? It's still not the thing. It's just the token that we use to exchange for the thing. And we all agree upon what the value is. That's what I've always found so fascinating about business, is that we talk about, okay, so people who are interested in the kinds of things that we're interested here, people who tend to watch this live stream, it's not that the people who watch this aren't practical people who focus on practical things, but when there's a lot of times you'll hear this kind of critique of the way in which the people into the spiritual realm, well, that's nonsense, it's irrational, it's all you people are delusional, and anybody who, if you tried to talk about anything, like there's a certain groups of people, like if I talked about my spirit guides, they'd be like, oh God, you're crazy or whatever. Like there's people who will talk about, that's not real. You need to focus on what's real. So the question then becomes, well, it's not tangible, right? It's like, so let's focus on what's real. So I'm like, okay, so we have an entire system where we go to work. Now, if you want to talk, either to earn these physical tokens, okay, that we agree have a value, but if we decided they didn't have a value, they wouldn't. And we do it to sustain something called an economy, which is not a real thing. You can't keep an economy as a pet. You can't take it home and feed it. And, it's a concept. It's not a thing. Okay? So when we talk about being material, I'm like, yeah, but we live in a world where we talk about the material and there's no actual, like, we're not talking about things. We might exchange that for things, but generally, I mean, because the things that we really need, like, food and stuff like that, a lot of times we see the prices go up and up and up on that because there's this whole thing of supply and demand. If people need it more, then we're going to charge more for it, or we're going to give you less and, put more in. And, good morning. There's this whole thing around, what is real. And I just I've always found it really fascinating that I live in a world where you were constantly told you need to focus on what's real. But I'm like, what's real is something that, like I said, in the event of an absolute disaster where everything collapsed, what you have that's real, you'll see how real it is. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, you can't eat paper money. You can't eat, it's like things like NFTs and stuff like that. It's like you have these digital pictures and that people will buy. And strictly speaking, they could disappear. I'm thinking of, but even when you have like a physical thing, like I'm thinking of the Banksy that somebody had bought like for, I forget, $1 million or something. And literally the second that it was sold, it was like a shredder came and just like destroyed it. I mean, it's a lot of this stuff that we talk about as being solid and concrete isn't. Okay, it's not. You are. It's basically they're all ideas. Okay, we're functioning in a world of ideas. Bitcoin makes me feel like that. Yeah, and that actually came up the other day too, because the question is Bitcoin currency? Is Bitcoin an investment? Is Bitcoin a scam? I mean, a lot of people who will, if you had people who were saying, hey, I'm going to do this and pay you in Bitcoin, they're probably scammers. In fact, 100% they're scammers. But it was one of those things that, yeah, there were people who invested in it. I remember the people, and they made it seems like there was a big bubble, like the tons of money was being invested in it. Like if you had Bitcoin, it was worth an obscene amount of money, and then all of a sudden the bubble burst on that, and then it's not worth anything. Stock market's like that too. Basically the entire thing of the stock market is based entirely on owning pieces of paper that say you own a piece of a company or something. And all it is, it can go up and down depending on that. You could have a CEO who says the wrong thing one day and the whole value of your stock can tank. It's all a game. It's all speculation. But it's amazing to me how many people have decided that that's what reality is. Like, if I need to be focused on reality, because the thing that people say is focused on reality is making money. But that money is not physical stuff. So yes, I was kind of talking, writing to him about that last night. My little mini dissertation that probably is like, why is she writing me this long message? But it's just, but they had gotten into this discussion of what is real, and so the dream I had last night. That's why I wanted to dovetail this into that. I had a dream that it wasn't about me personally. It was more like I was watching this, or it was like I was watching a documentary or something like that. And it was about this woman who marries into this very, very wealthy family. And her name is Susan. Her name in the dream is Susan. And there might be a reason why that name got picked and not others. Probably because I'm editing the book of somebody named Susan who's writing about the Earth Mother. And so Susan is this woman and who gets this very kind of beautiful, kind of very typical kind of woman who, in the sense that women are, when they fall in love, it's like they want that kind of intimacy. They want that they need affection. They need, that kind of a thing. And she marries a guy who seems to be kind of like that. But he's very wealthy. He's like an heir. So he belongs to a family that is very, very wealthy. He's very, very intellectual. Okay, and a lot of times you will have something like that, where you have guys who are, they're rather idealistic, I guess is the word. And what kept coming into my mind was like that he was Aquarius. Okay, that was the word that was coming into my mind. And now if you know anything about Aquarius and astrology, Aquarians are very friendly people. And it's not that Aquarians don't have feelings, but they tend to be more detached as a sign. I mean, if you want to talk about the traits of the sign, they tend to be a little more emotionally detached. Now, I know Aquarians who are definitely not that way, who are can be very emotional, but there's almost this idea of that one can take a step back from their emotions, because Aquarius is an air sign, so it is more intellectual. Aquarians have to do with future thinking, and actually, what I'm just talking about with regard to this like virtual space and everything, and think about it, if we're supposed to be moving into this Aquarian type age, that's really a component of it. The fact that, you've got this virtual space that's taking on as much of a reality as the real space that we live in, the nature of the earth, the areas that we live in. And it also makes me think of, okay, since, if you happen to be a magician or work in that kind of area, the idea of creating an egregore or creating a watcher or a thought form, you're creating something that actually can have a reality and do something, and you create it from mental energy, and you can also dissolve it from mental energy. And there may be a lot of things that float around as egregores that people have created. I mean, I've heard it talked about in like haunted house cases and stuff where there's paranormal activity, but it's not really like that there's like a ghost there or whatever per se. It's an egregore. Everybody's like, oh yeah, there's totally this thing in this house. And then after a while, it's like this thing gets a story, and then it almost takes on like an energetic identity, which is weird. But that's been talked about in the way that can happen. And so we start to talk about this thing of mental reality and, physical reality, which technically, there's not really technically a separation, but it's kind of like, okay, how do these interact? And what's kind of happened, though, in this dream is she marries this guy, and she has this game that she plays. Now, I don't know what it is. It's kind of like, it's almost like having like a board game type thing. There's something in front of her, and for some reason, she is obsessed with playing this game in this dream. And her husband's not interested in it. Nobody else is. They all think she's like ridiculous for wanting to play this game. And there becomes this distance between like her husband, like she wants the affection from him. She wants to be close. Good morning, Suda. And she wants to be close to him. I'm talking about a dream right now, just for context. She has, So she's playing this game, and she's playing it completely by herself, because at this point her husband, who's very intellectual and he's like very philosophical, has literally no interest in her and what she's doing, and she very badly wants that affection, but she's not getting it. So a lot of times what happens is when you don't get that affection in a marriage or a relationship, you just kind of close off and do your own thing, which is kind of what she does. But at some point, now the other interesting thing in the dream was that she was followed around by this black cat, and this black cat absolutely loved her. Like, if you had a cat that loves you, that kind of like runs around your feet and wants to always jump in your arms, and just follows you like a dog almost. The cat that just loves you. It was a black cat. So, and she was like, it's the space I always saw her walking in was like, if you ever went into like a charity shop or maybe a junk shop, or even something like the Habitat for Humanity Restore, like something where you have secondhand items, like lots of them. And it's like she's trying to walk through this space with all of this stuff, and this cat is like kind of following her around. But what this comes to find out is that she was married to this guy through an arrangement of a woman who was called Jess in this dream for some reason. But it was like this great museum of this great benefactor family that had all this money. And it was like she was the curator, but she brought Susan in to marry this guy. I don't know the name of the guy, wasn't given a name. And they kind of end up leading these very separate lives, but she ends up in this place. And eventually it's like, I don't know, like in the dream, it didn't say there's a divorce or a death or anything, but it's very clear that now she's just kind of working for pennies, like running the junk shop. Okay. And she's not even the person, like she's the one who takes the donations. And for some reason in this dream, I was donating. Now I have, dishes at home that are violet. In fact, I have one here. I can just show you what they look like. They're violet, okay? I bought these actually after I got divorced, and they're just the ones I've used for the last 20 years or so. And for some reason, it was one of those plates. And for some reason, I had donated the entire set to her, but I had missed a plate. And that's because the plate was dirty, okay? There was something on it. And so it was like I was cleaning this plate, like as I was waiting, because I'm like, okay, I've got to give her the last plate. So that she has the complete set. And I felt like I had just donated the other like the day before or something. So in this stream, so what happens is I'm waiting online. There's somebody in front of me waiting to donate something. And I remember the clock said 20 minutes to 8. And 8 o'clock always shows up in my dreams too, which is really weird. But they were like 20 minutes to 8. And the woman who was at the counter said, oh, well, she's on tea break, 20 minutes, come back at 8. And she'll talk to you. So I thought, oh, okay, there's somebody ahead of me and I'm going to have to wait. But then I was talking to this woman, and now she was kind of like, she had kind of like, sandy hair that was like graying and shorter, and she looked older, and she was wearing like a black smock, like her apron, like people will wear sometimes in the store when they're trying to, but it was all black. And I went to her and I said, okay, I gave you these plates. I have the last plates. And she just smiled at me and she said, she says, not everyone comes in here and brings anything of quality. And it was just, but she said it smiling, like she thought what I was giving her was of quality. But she says, oh, most people don't. And I woke up and I was really sad after this dream. And I realized, I said, because, the imagery of it, okay, because again, I talk a lot about dream symbolism. I do regular dream workshops for people if they want to participate. But so first of all, the Aquarian thing. Yeah, not only are we talking about the future we're moving into, but getting back to what I was talking about earlier about virtual reality, what's real, what's not real, what's tangible, what's not, what's part of nature, what is stuff that is created more with the intellect. And, in these kinds of, created through humans, through the human mind, rather than what is part of the natural world that we live in. And I feel like that Susan was a representation of like the earth, or the earth mother. The imagery is totally Chthonic. There's a black cat, okay, which a lot of times we connect that with witchcraft and things, right? But she's the wisdom of the earth, right? There's all this stuff. Now, if you remember that the word, well, maybe you don't remember, but Pluto, if you talk about the underworld as Pluto, then Pluto comes from one of the words that's its root is a Greek word, Pluton, and Pluton basically means wealth. It means treasure. Certainly in the Hindu conception of the underworld is actually a brighter and more shiny. There's more light in the underworld because it is because of all the gems underground and all the gold. because that's where you get it from. That's where you get stuff that we equate with material wealth. You know, precious gems, gold, silver, it's all mined from underground, right? So that space can be known as like Pluton. It's the place of wealth. So in Hindu mythology, that's the place of the Nagarajas, of the serpents, and they're all like have all these shining jewels, and they say that it's actually beautiful and brighter than the upper world, is the way that it's conceived, because there's all this beautiful treasure underground. And you can take that as a metaphor for the fact that, yeah, the deep treasure, when we talk about in Western thinking that, oh, we need to, you know, Christ conquered death and we need to stay away from the underworld, and, you know, and all the work that I do around death and you know, transition and so forth, I'm like, no, because that's the space where the treasure is. You know, that's the treasure you're actually looking for. The treasure that's hard to attain is that treasure of the underworld. And that kind of demands that we do a certain kind of work to get to it, right? But this Earth Mother, kind of representing this Chthonic space, she's in a shop that's filled with treasure. That's treasure for somebody, right? But it's like a junk shop, and it's more like something that she's giving away or giving very cheap to people who don't have, you know, in theory, don't have a lot of money. I know there's a lot of people who are thrifting who are not poor, but nonetheless, it's the idea that you have this space. And so, and I just felt like, but it really saddened me that it's like, okay, there's somebody with a lot of intellect, with a lot of good brain power, who doesn't value her. The game she's playing is not interesting to him, okay, in this dream. And it is, in a certain sense, all a game. Like I was saying earlier, you know, we talk about, well, you have to live in the real world and have real values and be real sensible. I'm like, yeah, but it's all based on something that's an illusion that could crash tomorrow if we had like a major catastrophe and all of the world's financial systems went down. I mean, finance works because we've agreed that that's how it should work. We agree that the dollar has this kind of a value versus the yen versus the pound versus the euro versus, you know, all the other currencies. We agree on what those values are. And those values don't, if it came down to it, it's like again, back to Alan Watts, you know, if push came to shove, if you're starving, you can't eat a pile of money, you know? You can't eat, you have a picture of the food on the menu, or you have the words that tell you what the dish is. Eating that is not a substitute for actually eating the food. There's just certain things that we require for nourishment that words alone are not going to provide that. Okay. Hence the reason that we don't want to focus exclusively on the intellectual realm for everything. That there's, there's this dismissal of emotion. There's this dismissal of feeling, dismissal of, it's all playing a game, really. But it's so this woman is now separated, and she's kind of relegated to taking things and then giving them. Okay, so that makes this Susan in this dream a real Earth Mother in a way, and so. And I also think about the fact that when we think about Earth rituals, ancient Earth rituals, there's always something that has to be given up to the Earth Mother. You know, people will, sacrifice part of the harvest or something like that. Something has to be given to the Earth Mother. And when you give something, then you're eligible to sort of get something. You know, it's like a give and take. You can't just completely ignore the Earth, suck everything out of it, and then expect that's going to go on, or expect that there's not going to be repercussions for that. So it's interesting that I had this dream, but I just felt like it was so sad, like the disconnect between the wonderful intellect that we have as humans and the way in which this whole other thing is just considered stupid and is devalued. And so it was just so interesting. And I thought the fact that I had this violet plate, which again, I showed earlier, and it showed up in the dream that I was donating these to her. It's like, to me, that's a representation of, well, it depends on how some people see it. In terms of chakra colors, some people see this as indigo and this as violet. I've only seen this as violet and this as white, okay, in terms of chakras. I've always seen as violet, and I've seen this as Sahasrara as white. And some people say, oh, this is indigo and that's, violet, okay. But I feel like in this dream it was like, because I've been having a whole lot of dreams around seeing without your eyes. And so I almost feel like cleaning the spot off of the purple dish. It's like, yeah, clearing off what's not letting you see with the other eye, with the third eye, and now giving that to the Earth Mother. I feel like that has a lot to do with my work in Chtonia as well, because that's what a lot of my thing is giving. My book is about how the Earth ends up being devalued in a system of salvation, and where we're all going to be saved from the earth, and we're going to transcend, and we're going to be saved from death, and all this stuff, and so I almost feel like it's like she's saying, like, thanks for giving me something of quality here, because it's like, yeah, the people aren't valuing it. The earth just becomes a collection of junk, right? Which might have some treasure for some people, but and of course she's somebody who ends up having no wealth herself. None of the wealth that see. But she does have all of this stuff, and a lot of it really is practical stuff that people would, in theory, would use. So so I don't know. So to me, that dream ended up being kind of a meditation on the real versus the unreal, when we're talking about the earth and we're talking about what's in the material sense and what's terrestrial. And I think when we all talk about abundance or abundance practice, what are we talking about when we're trying to bring abundance in? What is real abundance? Is it just having a collection of stuff? Is it, because it's like I said, there's this collection of stuff around, but this woman is still very, very poor. You know what I mean? And, even though she had married somebody who was very, very rich, and in theory, the idea of the one who's going to save you, who's going to take care of you for the rest of your life, you're going to be financially well off. But that doesn't happen in this dream. It's like they're separated because he's decided that she's, and the intimacy between them goes away. So she's cut off, and now she's just kind of trying to play this game by herself. And to me, that's almost like a sign of like, yeah, we've got to getting the masculine and feminine elements of things back together. They shouldn't be separated, but they are, and it's very, very sad. And it leaves this earth like just to be this collection of stuff. Or that's the way it's perceived. And it's like once, and it's kind of like once you buy something, think about it, people who on certain holidays, if they get gifts, whether it's your birthday, if you celebrate Christmas, then Christmas presents, stuff like that. Oh, I really want this thing so bad. And then you get it, they play with it for like a day or two, and then it's not interesting anymore, And I also even feel like the intellect is like that now. We don't value the intellect, because we have the internet now. We don't. It's like there's so much information out there. Back with times when you had to, good morning, Sam. Back at the time when you had to go to like a library, or whether you had to go to you had to go someplace to get information, or you had to buy books, or you had to, when it wasn't that easy for you to just go out and get information. Like now you just open your phone. Oh, I want to know something. I'll just Google it, right? And and again, I could go into my librarian argument about why the stuff you find on Google is not as good, still not as good as the stuff that you get in the library, because now good information has to be paid for. But anyway, just putting that aside, it's in theory, it's like now that we have so much information coming at us every day, we don't value it. It does actually kind of get into the theory of scarcity. There was a book by Carlo Ginzburg with a really attractive title of The Cheese and the Worms. And I read this book in grad school. Carlo Ginzburg's actually a fascinating historian of like the medieval period. He's actually an anthropologist. And he actually was going through an account of a heresy trial from the Inquisition. And it was a man called Minocchio. He was a miller. So he was a kind of a regular guy, but he had some money because he had a business and everything. He wasn't part of the aristocracy, but he was literate. He could read. And he owned about 20 books, and that was considered to be something of great value. And he was walking around spreading ideas that the church found heretical, and they were trying to figure out who influenced him. But as you go through this transcript and the stuff, because one of the things he says in there is like, oh, I don't think the Garden of Eden thing happened. It's kind of like, everything probably rose out, kind of like when you leave cheese out and then the worms come out of it. Like, they used to call spontaneous generation kind of a thing, which has been disproven. But it was like this idea that he was thinking outside of what the authorities told him to think. And it's because he had every book, he read it very, very carefully. And then he started to think for himself about it, think critically, like, well, okay, they're talking about this. Well, what about this? And trying to merge it with whatever knowledge he might have been given by the church or whatever. And this guy was considered to be a heresiarch, is what they call it. Basically, somebody who had a heresy that was not, it wasn't connected, like he was inventor of a heresy, and I think he was probably burned at the stake for it, but, because he was spreading ideas that were not, that were against what the church was teaching as doctrine or as dogma, and hence the problem of having some kind of a theocracy, but again, anyway, separate topic. But the point being, the point that my professor had made on that was he said, okay, he says, this guy only owned about 20 books, which was probably a lot. Nobody there had books. A lot of people were not literate. They couldn't read. And he treasured every bit of knowledge that he got, and he worked it through his mind. He might not have always came to the right conclusions, but he was thinking. He says, now there is so much information that nobody values it. You know, I think about this as a professor. Like, students, they just think, oh yeah, I'll just make some crap up for my paper, and then I'll find 5 sources somewhere, just so my professor says I have to have sources, and then that's pretty much it. They don't know how to use them. They don't know how to read them. They don't care. They don't want to read them. Oh my God, professor, I have to read more than 2 pages? I mean, are you serious? Like, I get, you know, it's, people don't value information anymore because there's too much of it. And that's almost like the thing of when there's too much of something, you don't value it. You take it for granted. And so when something always gives and gives and gives and you never have to give back, then you don't value it. So yeah, so librarians have a rough time because it's like, you know, picking between what's good information and what's crap information, you know, and trying to figure out the difference between the two. And so I don't know. It's just really, so it's interesting as we kind of move into this Aquarian space, which is going to be more a space that's dominated more out of Capricorn space, which would have been more earth oriented. As we move into more like a fire and air orientation, then it's just kind of like, okay, but we need to think about what, you know, just like, you know, we've kind of lost the sense of the importance of the earth, or maybe we're starting to regain it with things like climate change and stuff like that, you know, at least in that kind of a sense in terms of having an environment we can actually live in, but also the relationship to money, which probably would have to change as well. And I know certain astrologers have talked about that they think that as of 2025, 2026, you're going to see a very different conception of money. In fact, this full moon that's happening tomorrow is considered to be, he had said that this was going to, you know, that Jupiter-Saturn opposition with all the other aspects of the Grand Cross, he said, yeah, it's going to be a really powerful supermoon for the beginning of dismantling of existing economic systems, is at least what Steve Judd thinks, in terms of how those planets, you know, tend to behave historically in the global setting. So, you know, we may start seeing these kinds of changes, but I think also with what the dream kind of was saying to me was just like the fact that people, you know, they don't value the stuff. It just becomes a lot of junk. And the person who's giving it, it's only giving it to the people, or, you know, it's like trying to receive something of quality and then trying to give something of quality to people. But, and again, people seem to want to give away a lot of this stuff. But it's stuff that they consider junk. It's something they don't value. So here's somebody that they don't value, and then she's saying to me in the end, well, you know, it's rare that somebody gives me anything that's of value. Most people don't do that. So yeah, so to me, I was just kind of like, wow, that was just kind of a potent, wake up about our relationship to the material world. And the way in which, as we move into a space where virtual spaces become a thing, become a type of reality, I mean, I think at some point we're not going to value those spaces either. And they're kind of almost touted as something better than what the real world is. So I don't know. I think this may kind of indicate why we need this, why there's this push towards the feminine, because it's like there's this disconnect between, even just psychologically, there's a disconnect between those things that we consider to be feminine, our emotions, our feelings, our sense of love, our sense of, being able to relate to people and all this stuff. It's all been replaced by, by the fact that none of that stuff is of any value, and people want to live in this space that is all about what might be or about what was, Yeah, living in the present, too, is kind of being a thing about that. So anyway, interesting dream that I had last night. Yeah, and our first card in our reading is moment to moment, right? Being in the present, literally what I just said. Being in the present. And just being in this world. And the inner feeling of which we are unaware here is the feeling of trust, okay? The idea that because we live in a world of the mind where we're always kind of worried about what might be happening next or what isn't happening. And so the feeling of trust is being able to say, I'm in a system that supports me. I just need to live in the present. I need to worry about the present moment. Not only I'm in a system supports me, but yeah, now we have the 10 of Pentacles. Now this is true wealth, right? We are the world. The wealth of the collective, the wealth of other people, If you go back to the metaphor of the ocean and the ocean waves, right? You know, you're part of the ocean. You're not a single wave struggling to make it on your own. You are part of a bigger system, and maybe you need to look among what you tend to think is junk and look for treasure there, you know? I mean, you know, where does the real abundance come from? And of course, the advice for us is we have the Three of Pentacles. This is the guidance card. Okay, so this is the idea that we do have, we are supported, we are guided. Okay, but the Three of Pentacles is also in more traditional decks a card of collaboration. The idea that you share ideas with people and you work towards something that's of benefit for people. In hero myths, the hero brings back the treasure hard to attain to share with the community. It's not like I gather a bunch of crap for myself that later on I'm not going to have any value for. Like that's what the game has been. And it's like, is that the game you want to continue to be playing? And that's kind of what I feel, because I woke up, I actually cried after that dream. It was so, the emotions were so disconnected from this person who actually had, with their intellect and everything, actually had something very beautiful about them. But there was no connection there because what she had was not of value to that person. It was just all what was in the mind, you know? Now, our outcome is the Page of Pentacles, okay? This is the card of adventure, all right? So moving into like this new space, you're in an adventure, and really, it may in a certain way be an old space. There's one card that I have in my dream deck that is about origins, and it said origins always, there's never such a thing as a pure origin. You know, when it's trying to get back to like the Big Bang or the beginning of the universe, the true origin of something always has its origin in something else. So there's basically what it's saying is that, yeah, like we're kind of back materially to these origins again. So again, Pentacle card or Rainbow card in this deck. And it's almost like, yeah, this is the little child like walking into the forest, like discovering it for the first time. It's an adventure that you're on, and you just need to trust, and you need to stay in the present. And also, I think there's this recognition that we're not alone. I think we talked about that in the Chiron class yesterday, you know? We're not really alone. You know, everybody has the thing that they're going through, but we're being guided through this new space, and I think there's an attempt to guide us into a space where we care about other people. You know, imagine that. I mean, and there's a lot of lip service paid to it, but the reality is, like, when corporations, for example, put out commercials being like, oh, we care about this and that, it's like, no, you're just branding that because you think that people are going to buy that. It's not because you actually care. You know, and I think the Daily Show did a thing on that. They're like, they don't actually care. It's just, but, that seems to be a thing people care about. Let's capitalize on it. And that becomes the thing. But it's almost like this guy in this dream marries the Earth Mother, but then kind of goes, oh, well, I don't, what you have to offer me is not very interesting. I'm gonna hide out in this world of ideas, you know? So, it's just, yeah. It was just a profound dream that I had last night, and I was like, okay, that connects in with that those of you who joined late, and yes, and I apologize if I don't know if anybody thought that I was going to be starting at 7 today. I start at 7 tomorrow, so I don't know if that was part of it. Imagine love is branding. Yeah, that's it, and that's actually kind of a good point too. Oh, and look at this. Our card is the New Start is coming. We've got the New Moon card. New Start is coming, and I literally had just gotten the Adventure card, which is the New Start. Yeah. Because that's just it. Because I think, and if you ask anybody about love, that's a whole separate topic. I actually do a whole myth class just on love, which I can do actually, again, as part of the series that I'm doing if people are interested. If they're not, then I don't have to. But it's, love as, if you ask people about love, if you fall in love with somebody, and then if you marry somebody, and the expectations often that you're given growing up versus what the reality actually is so different. And then even in terms of what does it mean to love other people? I mean, they always talk about the different types of love, right? That was probably a Platonic thing initially. I think the Christians had talked about like agape as like that kind of Platonic kind of love, but it's not. It's just about just the idea that when you operate from that earth space. It's like the Bacchus and Philemon story. You know, they're two very simple people. They don't have a lot of money, but with the little bit that they're willing to have, they're willing to share with other people. And it's like Amma will say, okay, Amma would always say, like, in order to understand the poor, you have to live like the poor, is what she would say. Or you'll even hear like in biblical terms, poverty of spirit, right? The idea that you are not so that your life is not about just acquiring a bunch of crap. It's about being, it's about that fundamental idea that I have things, and that what I have I share with others, and that there's an abundance in doing that. There's an abundance in participating and having empathy and caring for the people around you, instead of detaching and being in your head away from it. So I think it's almost saying, like, okay, as you're going to move into this Aquarian space, you don't want to really disconnect from that. We have disconnected from it, and we probably need to reconnect it to make that new virtual space work the way that it needs to. The work the way that we are going to survive and be happy and be peaceful in it. So anyway, I'm a 1/4 today, and tomorrow I will be on at 7 a.m. So I hope this was interesting. I thought this was kind of this just literally popped up this morning, and it's just this whole time, this whole Grand Cross week has been a bit of an adventure for me. Speaking of adventures, so that was just interesting that came up for me while I was doing this. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. I do hope that this was of interest to you, and I hope this reading is has some kind of meaning. But it does seem like we're thinking a little bit about the material realm. Thank you, incredibly deep dream. Yeah, and they all have been this week. It's crazy, but but yes, thank you. And yeah, so I don't know. It's just very. I was just kind of very surprised to have it, but I guess considering the work that I do on my other channel, doing a lot of the academic and intellectual work around trying to understand dark feminine figures and understanding the earth and understanding the chthonic and understanding all of that. Chthonios, by the way, I throw that word around a lot. People don't know what that is. That's the Greek word for basically the earth and what's under the earth. They talk about it as the chthonic realm, Chthonic, chthonic. And I call it Chthoniya, my podcast, because I'm talking about the feminine underworld. So, yeah, so this idea of that. So anyway, everybody have a great Sunday, and I will be back on 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So everybody stay safe, stay comfortable, and I will see you tomorrow. So take care. Have a good day.